My greetings come directly from North Boreal forests and peatlands. In the beginning, I want to make it very clear that I'm not here to speak for any Indigenous peoples. I wish to share the experiences of my organization, Snow Change, has on working together with different Indigenous and local communities when we are trying to find answers to the global climate crisis, biodiversity loss, and cultural erosion. Snow Change is a nonprofit independent organization. It was founded in 2000 to address the growing concern over environmental degradation and climate change in the northern communities all across the Arctic. We're based in Finland, but we work internationally. Our main focus is on the North Boreal environments, but we have partnerships with Indigenous Australians, Maori in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and other Pacific islands. We have a very strong scientific dimension in our work, but we hold traditional knowledge, stories, handicrafts, fishing, hunting, and other elements of our forest culture sacred. Snow Change works on rewilding and restoring large sites on a landscape scale to serve as internationally relevant biodiversity hotspots and carbon sinks. We have a special focus on peatland restoration. So why peatlands? Peatlands are the largest natural terrestrial carbon store. They store more carbon than all other vegetation types in the world combined. Damaged peatlands are a major source of greenhouse gas emissions, and peatland restoration can reduce emissions significantly. For example, the International Union for Conservation of Nature has recommended that countries should include peatland conservation into their commitments to international agreements. We in Snow Change see strong participation of traditional cultures and local communities as solution. We need spaces where modern science and Indigenous or traditional knowledge can form a dialogue on an equal footing, and where power is being justly distributed among participants. Free, prior, and informed consent is a guideline developed for working with Indigenous communities, but it can be applied in working with other local communities. It is a process that enables a community to exercise their fundamental right to give, or, this is important, withheld consent to all proposed activities, projects, legislative or administrative measures, and policies that will take place in or impact their lands, territories, resources, or livelihoods. It is our understanding that local communities are more likely to employ environmentally sustainable practices when they enjoy territorial security and local autonomy. Supporting female leadership is at the forefront of our work. A core value in our work is that nature has intrinsic value. Fundamentally, it is not credits, services, raw materials, or solutions. Humans belong to the natural system. To thrive, we need our habitats and ecosystems to be healthy and sustainable, just like any other beings. For many Indigenous and traditional cultures, nature is not a commodity to be bought, sold, patented, or preserved apart from society. But nature is what defines humanity. The earth is a mother and cannot be compromised or monopolized. There are other recent examples where the Indigenous worldview has been taken seriously, and the deep connections and intimate relations between people and place have been officially recognized, such as the granting of legal personhood to the Wanganui River in Aotearoa, New Zealand. We also need to address and remember the fact that climate is not a separate entity either. It is deeply intertwined with ecology and biodiversity and human life. Just like climate change and its local implications, as unexpected change in weather patterns are impacting all of us. These systems are interlinked, and to us also, the solutions to this crisis need to be comprehensive and cautionary in their approach. Northern peatlands and fragile ecosystems need to be protected and, where applicable, restored in ways that include the traditional owners and Indigenous and local communities and their rights. Thank you.
Yep, towards climate justice, but the thing is, Mother Earth is being compromised, and that's why we're here. And how do we stop that? And how do we reduce carbon? How do we get there? I'm just going to go down, and I'm going to start off with Toni.
I'm Toni Vidan, V-I-D-A-N. Currently, I'm a president of EEB. It is European Environmental Bureau. That's the biggest network of environmental organizations in Europe. We have 180 member groups all around Europe. And our Brussels office is very active on European policies. But I guess I'm invited and because I was in a climate action network in the 90s. So 30 years ago, when there was a COP1 in Berlin, I was 200 meters from here on a big rally making a speech on the occasion of COP1. So I have a little bit of institutional memory how concept of climate justice developed within the environmental movement. And if nothing else, I would just like to remind us how different opinion about what is climate justice there is. I mean, if we ask some oil executive, he would say that climate justice for him, it's usually him, that he should be reimbursed for the lost profit if for some whatever reason government decides to cancel license of their company's work. And this is this probably most bizarre aspect of what some institutions think is just. When we look on the investor-state dispute settlement cases where our governments are sued for billions of so-called lost profit. Now, if you ask owner of the coal-fired power plant in Germany, for him, it is also very usually him. For him, justice is to be reimbursed for closing down of the coal plant and getting more money than when the coal plant is practically working. For some banker, climate justice could be that, solar production should be shifted from Germany to China because it's cheaper to make solar panels there. And we had that problem 30, 20 years ago when we lost production in Germany. So it is very different what one thinks it's climate justice. From a point of view of decarbonization and producers of renewable energy, I can share with you experience of the small producers of green electricity in Croatia. Do I have access to the grid in a just way? If I don't, that's definitely, not providing climate justice to the small producers. Do I have access to capital? Do I have access to the European energy market with my green electricity in a just way? So if we are not creating framework which is enabling small producers to contribute to the decarbonization with the green electricity in a just way, we are obviously failing to provide climate justice for a very practical aspect of fighting climate change. But on the other hand, if I'm a big producer of green electricity for example, wind, then we have cases that actually every use of renewables is basically privatization of natural resource which society at large consider common. And if we would ask people on the street in Zagreb, in Croatia, who is the owner of the wind, they would say, well, I don't know, but it's ours. But we have cases that big developers are actually privatizing those local renewable energy resources without just compensation to the society. So we obviously have lack of justice in that respect as well. And just to finish, of course, as a EEB, we facilitate the debates on various aspects, and I will not go into the details, but I can point to the recent paper we made on a green solidarity, guiding principles for a truly just social climate fund. So if you want to read in a detail what EEB developed with also social NGOs as the recommendations on climate justice in this particular political framework, there is a good report. But just I would like to highlight one aspect of what we as organization think it's important aspect of climate justice. And that is actually participation of citizens, public and stakeholders in planning of national policies. Because that's the stage in which justice or sense of justice of stakeholders should be captured So I just will end with that. I think it's enough for the introduction. Thank you.
I'm afraid we probably only just have time for introductions. Anyway, Lili, you come from a different perspective. You come from, well, you don't come from a different perspective, but you are looking at how the genie has come out of the bottle, and you can't put the genie back in, but you can stop the genie from continuing to come out of the bottle, as it were.
Thank you. So my name is Lili Fuhr. I work for an international NGO called the Center for International Environmental Law, or CIEL. We're a nonprofit working at the intersection of environmental justice, human rights, and international law. And where I would like to start is actually the idea that how we define a problem very much predetermines how we think about solutions, right? So if we define climate change as a problem of, abstract emissions up there in the atmosphere, we're talking emission reductions as solutions. If we're talking about excess carbon in the atmosphere, some people immediately conclude we need carbon removal, right? So the way that we define a problem predetermines our thinking around solutions. It took us more than 3 decades as a climate justice movement to actually put the main driver of the climate emergency onto the international policy agenda, fossil fuels, right? And our extractivist economic model that is so dependent and intertwined with fossil fuels, oil, gas, and coal. 30 years, like the Paris Agreement doesn't mention fossil fuels, nor does the UNFCCC. But with renewable energies really taking off, the energy transition, too little, too late, too slow, but it's taking off. The fossil fuel industry right now, they really with their back against the wall right now. And what they need is a lifeline and an escape hatch strategy. And that's where I'm focused on. Because what we're seeing right now really is a new wave of denialism and deception. They're selling us magical techno fixes. And for me, this is really very much part of the polluted information environment that we've talked about yesterday in this event very much. So that magical thinking comes in the form of, techno fixes. So carbon removal, technological carbon removal, marine and solar geoengineering. Those are highly speculative, deeply problematic and risky technologies. Many of them are actually untestable. So what we're concretely talking about are ideas and proposals to dump chemicals into the ocean to increase carbon uptake, or to release reflective particles into the stratosphere to shield us from the sun, to block out the sun. But we cannot engineer our way out of the climate crisis because it's not a technological problem in the first place. So the way that we define the problem predetermines how we think about solutions, right? So what role is there for international law and policy making? That's where I come in with my work, and I just want to name 2 concrete global initiatives and proposals that receive quite a bit of backing and support and have some momentum that might be interesting for some folks in the room. As the UNFCCC, as the main climate policy forum, has failed to tackle fossil fuels for so long, there is now a proposal on the table for a complementary global, an agreement, not necessarily global, but an international agreement for a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. There is an initiative, it's currently backed by 15 nation states, and we're likely going to see the start of real negotiations between governments within the next year or so. And the other idea I wanted to mention, because when it comes to these magical techno fixes, all of them are deeply problematic. Some are actually a little bit more scary than others. And when it comes to solar geoengineering, the blocking out the sunlight type ideas, right? We need to put some red lines in the sand, and there are scientists who agree, and more than 500 scientists are calling for a solar geoengineering non-use agreement to really put a stop on the development and potential deployment of solar geoengineering technologies. So I'll leave you with those 2 ideas. Thank you.
We can go virtually because I believe that Felix doesn't have much time. There's Felix Finkbeiner, environmentalist and founder of the international tree planting and environmental advocacy organization Planet for the Planet. Felix, say a bit. Thank you.
Plan for the Planet is 16 years old now. We started off a small children youth organization, planting trees in our schools to address the climate crisis. And it's still a big part of what we do. We've got lots of about 100,000 kids all around the world that have participated, became our ambassadors, and got their local communities involved in planting trees, usually a symbolic act to show the need to seriously address the climate crisis. On top of that, we also restore forests at slightly larger scales in Mexico, Ghana, and Spain. Across these 3 places, we plant about 2 million trees a year to bring back intact biodiverse ecosystems, but also make sure that the local communities benefit directly from these ecosystems we establish through the integration of agroforestry approaches and so on. And the third part of what we do is we provide tools for community-led restoration work around the world. A series of software tools like our Fire Alert app and our Plant for the Planet donation platform, where about 100 million trees have been funded over the last 5 years, help small-scale community-led restoration efforts improve the way they restore forests, fund it, and protect these forests. And a big part of what we do there is also provide free restoration advice to community-led organizations around the world that needed to be able to further improve their work. Generally speaking, we have a huge amount of potential in addressing the climate crisis through better protecting and restoring the world's ecosystems. Very simply put, there used to be about twice as many trees on Earth as there are today. We used to have about 6 trillion trees growing on Earth. That was about 11,000 years ago. After the last ice age, and we had the biggest expansion of the world's forest cover. But since then, we humans have cut down a huge amount of this, and of these 6 trillion trees that used to grow, only about half of them, 3 trillion, grow today. And of course, we can't bring back all of these lost forests. Very simply, we're 8 billion people, and we need a lot of agricultural land. But we also have huge swaths of degraded ecosystems around the world that are not used for agriculture. And they are sufficient to restore about 1 trillion trees on Earth. We can increase the forest cover from the 3 trillion we have right now to 4 trillion. That has massive potential to absorb carbon around the world, especially when we focus on restoring ecosystems, as my colleague here mentioned, in peatland ecosystems and other areas with particularly high ecological value. So that's one small area that we are trying to contribute to. And of course, by restoring ecosystems around vulnerable communities, especially in countries in the global south, we can make a significant contribution, not just to address the climate crisis itself, but also climate justice.
Thanks very much indeed for that, Felix. I want to get now to Heidi Kühn, who's founder of Roots of Peace, the reason being that you have a lot of synergies with what Felix was saying. You are changing fields of death into fields of life, and life for the long term, hopefully for the planet.
Well, thank you very much. It's my honor to be here. My name is Heidi Kühn. I'm founder of Roots of Peace and World Food Prize Laureate 2023. I'm here to talk about something we don't normally talk about when we talk about climate change, and that is landmines. Today, we live in a world where there's an estimated 110 million landmines silently poised in 60 countries. And since the war began in Ukraine, 30% of the land is now contaminated by landmines, UXO, and cluster munition. Now, as we seek to heal the one Mother Earth that we've been given to shepherd, to honor, as you say, from the indigenous people, landmines were created during the Civil War in the United States. Dormant seeds of hatred silently sown beneath the earth in which we are given to walk. Children kicking soccer balls out of bounds lose a limb or a life, and a farmer farming their field. I was honored to be a speaker at the COP29 in Azerbaijan, and after my speech in the walled, beautiful soccer stadium in Baku, I asked the International Eurasia Press Fund to take me into the fields of Karabakh and to suit up with the women deminers. Women, we bear the seeds of life. This is International Women's Month. Next week is spring. Tomorrow is Nowruz, which is the Arab New Year. This is a time for human history to look at what we have done to the one Mother Earth that we have been given to be stewards. As we remove a landmine, as we plant a grapevine or any seed of life, a fruit tree, it not only feeds future generations, but it sequesters the carbon that is going to fight the climate crisis. I've been very honored and privileged to work in Afghanistan since 2002, a country 80% dependent upon agriculture for jobs. But in 2002, 80% of the land was contaminated by landmines. And so as Roots of Peace, again for over 2 decades, has removed those landmines, we are determined this spring to plant peace through agriculture. Now, our funds in the United States were abruptly cut just a few weeks ago, but I'm not one to give up. We're looking for alternatives in terms of the funding because the farmers in the fields are depending upon us. For when people can eat and have the dignity to walk their land without fear, peace through agriculture is possible. And I'd just like to end my overview with all of you to say that an hour ago, I stood outside Brandenburg Gate and with a wonderful gentleman whose roots are in Afghanistan, Sadiq. We held a simple white rose. We are calling upon the world to plant white roses during this spring and to plant 1 billion fruit trees in this spring of 2025. When I go back to San Francisco, we will mark the 80th anniversary of the signing of the United Nations Charter, but it began under the towering redwood trees of Muir Woods, where the Miwok Indians once walked, and those giant redwood trees represented the seeds of life. Franklin Delano Roosevelt never wanted a World War III, and that's why he convened them in nature versus cement walls. May we leave this beautiful World Forum and plant the roots of peace on earth now. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Heidi. Let's go to Paolo Piffaretti. He is the CEO at Climb-Fi, a global leader in permanent carbon removal through, I think you finance things more than actually do it yourself.
We're not project developers, yeah.
Exactly, so give us a sense.
Yeah, so I'm Paolo Piffaretti. I'm the CEO of Climb-Fi. We're one of the leading CDR, so that's carbon dioxide removal asset managers. And we manage portfolios of CDR, so durable carbon removals, on behalf of large corporate mandates. And we hold the mandates of companies the likes of the Boston Consulting Group, the Lego Group, Euronext, Adyen, Engie, the energy provider out of Europe. And yes, our aim is very much to provide the advanced market commitments needed to help scale these climate-critical infrastructure to reach the climate targets set by the Paris Accord, which are to remove 10 gigatons of carbon by 2050 annually.
From the World Food Programme, we have Martin Fricke. Gives a sense of how you are driving towards climate justice in all this and how you fit into the innovators and changemakers, as it were. I think it probably is the latter.
Well, thank you, and I will be very brief because I hope we have a discussion with the audience. I mean, number one, I'm really happy that we are not speaking about whether or whether not we need climate justice. It's been a long fight. It's an established concept. The question now really is, how do you build climate justice? And here I want to lobby for smallholder women farmers because these are the most affected by climate change, arguably amongst fisher folks and other people. But it's very simple. The poorer you are, the more directly dependent you are from nature. And if you are directly dependent from nature, and you cannot afford bottled water if you need it, but you drink water from the local well, the more affected you are from climate change. Now, I'm working for the World Food Programme. We come in when people don't have enough to eat. The situation here is dramatic. By Christmas 2019, we had about 135 million people in acute food insecurity. Today, we have 340 million. And that also shows that something is fundamentally wrong with our global food systems and their incredible dependence on exports or imports, vice versa. So food sovereignty, building food sovereignty for people where they live, encouraging regional trade, which is totally underdeveloped in African countries, is a part of that. Now I'm coming to the smallholder farmers. Despite misinformation, really, 80% of what Africans eat is actually produced by smallholders. And smallholders in an African context means basically about 2/3 women. It's a very female thing. These women often don't have land rights, they are marginalized, they don't have a voice in their governments. Now, if we are supporting smallholder farmers, and particularly in the world's drylands, so in the drylands belt south of the Sahara Desert, we can do very many good things at the same time. We can push back the desert, we can bring back land into arable use. That's not a theory, it's a practice. We did that with more than 300,000 hectares. It's incredibly cheap. It builds life and livelihoods for the women there. It builds income, it builds food security, and it does sequester carbon, but not as a carbon capture project. And I totally agree with Lili. All these techno fixes, they are science fiction, and they are just blinding you for the reality. This is real, and this is real because it doesn't start with, let's have a techno solution for carbon sequestration. It starts with food security. Last sentence. If it all makes sense, why is it not happening at scale? Very simple. If you are restoring the land, you will need for 3 to 5 years support. Somebody's got to give you money, somebody's got to feed you, otherwise you can't do that. After that, we see the ladies not only becoming food secure, even in times of extended droughts, they become actually little entrepreneurs. They produce a bit more, they go to the local market, they can sell. You can build a virtuous circle. And in all these billions that are moved as climate money, I just plea, and I stop here, not to forget the smallholder farmers, because this is where you produce climate justice.
Paolo, exactly, because Paolo immediately started nodding his head about techno fixes, please.
Yeah, no, I'm just, first of all, I'm a bit astonished, because here I feel like I'm the youngest in this panel, and it's a recurring theme to see older generations sowing doubt, delaying things, and having to leave ourselves deal with the mess you guys have created. Merchants of doubts is what you guys are. And the science is very clear. We need carbon removal. We need to do it at a scale that is unprecedented, because we've been dumping excess carbon to our atmosphere for the better part of 2 centuries, and delaying the process is only making the problem worse. Now, that is not to be exclusive. This goes in hand with reduction, with the support program you have in mind. But then again, to be speaking so much out of place, out of what the scientific facts is, I think, beyond me. Part of me wants to walk out of this panel. It's a scam. You guys are a joke, really. I'm just really surprised. I've never been in a panel that is so unserious. It actually makes me kind of nervous and pissed.
Okay, well, tell us why. I mean,
yes.
What can...
Explain the reasons why, so that
exactly. This is what I'm getting to.
No, right? I'm saying this because, of course, these are very targeted attacks. Why? Because carbon removal, I mean, it's in the IPCC, it's in the Paris Accord. It's very much needed.
Would you distinguish between some forms of carbon removal that would be common ground with them, and some forms of carbon renewal that you think are excessively manipulative of the regenerative processes of nature and thus endanger us? Would you make those distinctions?
No, I mean, right now what we're figuring out is which technologies can scale to climate relevance. We need to remove 10 gigatons of carbon. And so right now what the process is trying to find out which technologies can scale to that size. There's a wide range of removal pathways which go from direct air capture to enhanced weathering, which are all also, if you take enhanced weathering or some form of biomass carbon capture and removal, these take natural occurrences and enhance them through technology to store more durably the carbon that is more naturally captured, through photosynthesis, for instance.
Toni, you put your hand up first.
I think that was my quick question. Okay, just 2 minutes to try to unpack things. First, I respect your generational anger. Let me be clear about that. I think older generation definitely needs to kind of stop talking and let solutions to the young people. So I understand your anger, and please apologize for us not being more effective. But I'm lost on your claim that we are delaying something. I'm advocating shift to renewables for more than 30 years, since '86 when Chernobyl blew up.
No, I wasn't referring to your comments,
who is
Toni.
delaying. It is fossil fuel sector which is delaying simple technological solutions which would not provide climate justice, but would decarbonize world and make us, let's say, more able to work on a justice. But now we are in a crisis, and unfortunately, fossil fuel sector is now throwing so-called technological solutions which serve to block, let's call it, real technological solutions. So I hope we agree on that.
Yeah, we do.
And I fully agree that you are angry and you have all the right to do, but maybe you misunderstood what we are trying to delay. We are not trying to delay real decarbonization and climate.
I think everybody's aiming for the same thing. The thing
That I
is,
would disagree,
well, everybody wants to see less carbon, right?
Well,
Yeah. Okay. And Martin, quickly, please.
Same here. I mean, first, we are all with you, and we've been spending substantial time fighting windmills and running against concrete walls, and I share your frustration. What I have just said on land restoration, it's not marginal. UNCCD, which is the land convention, estimates that 40% of the world's land is degraded. Some NGOs estimate it's 75%. Every piece of degraded land is a land where there is too little carbon in the soil. I'm talking about a gigantic possibility. And of course, I'm aware of the 10 gigaton figure. What I hope, and I've been criticized before, that I'm for the industry. And I think it's great that people like you put money into carbon sequestration. My little piece of advocacy is, please let us create a mechanism which is still not really functioning. It's emerging, by which smallholder farmers can benefit from this money. Because, we have a bottom billion, famously. And these people, they are looking for livelihoods, they are looking for jobs, and here is something where we can turn the world's poorest into a workforce for the world climate. I think it's a thing of beauty, and we should do that.
yeah, so first of all, I mean, there is carbon
Quickly.
sequestration, and then there's carbon removal, which are two distinct things. And to your point, I mean,
I should have spoken about removal,
Yeah.
because I'm with you. We need to remove carbon.
And to your point, I mean, one is not exclusive of the other. And if anything, I think what's really interesting about these permanent or durable carbon removal technologies is that they allow us to appreciate what the true cost of emissions are, which is something we haven't been able to do up until recently. When you're telling a company that effectively removing a ton of carbon will cost them, beyond, in between $150 up to, $1,000, it forces these organizations to rethink the emission in the first place and look for alternative ways to avoid the emission, to take place.
Yes.
And so it's a paradigm shift that these technologies bring to the table. Of course, right now, and what I mean by delay is that by sowing doubt about, the efficacy, which is not based on facts, there are projects that are already scaling to the megatons, and we're going to reach the 50 megatons by the end of the decade. We're trying to understand which are the technologies that can really rapidly scale to climate relevance.
Maybe you want to talk to these technologies.
Yes, he is. Heidi.
Yeah, I do.
I'd like to say thank you. I'm a mother of 4 grown children, and I understand your frustration with our generation. But I would like to clearly say that Roots of Peace has worked in Afghanistan and planted over 8 million fruit trees that are serving the smallholder farmers in all 34 provinces. And when I say I'm doing a White Rose campaign, it's not a flaky left coast idea where we're fruits, nuts, and flakes. I need your help because you are the next generation. I have an idea to call forth 1 billion trees to leave this conference, and I feel the same frustration. I don't want to tell everybody I met President Clinton last night, had a delicious dinner, met new friends, but it was at our first conference at 9 o'clock yesterday morning that we came up with this idea. Instead of an ice bucket challenge, let's do something. Maybe you can help me. I'm calling out a White Rose campaign, but maybe you can think of something edgier, muddy hands or something. But I think the planting of trees is the low-tech ways we can do this worldwide. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Lili.
Yeah, I think it's a complex conversation, and the science is complex, right? And when it comes to what the science actually say, I think it's important to distinguish between the physical science of climate change and the economic modeling that is also part of the IPCC, right? That is able to portray, some potential futures, and it's much easier to model some technologies than lifestyle and production and economic system changes in those economic models. And so the IPCC, in the physical science part, makes it clear that the idea that we could remove large amounts of carbon from the atmosphere permanently and not expect there to be some rebalancing is, at this point, highly uncertain. That's what they say. We can't count on it. And relying on carbon removal technologies delays real climate action now. That's also what the IPCC says.
Can't they both go and run at the same time?
Yeah, that's not
Well,
true.
are we doing enough? No, clearly not. What we're doing right now is not enough. Do we need carbon removal? Absolutely. That's not the same as can we have it, right? I brought this up yesterday in our pre-conversation, but I'll bring it up again here. It would be absolutely convenient to have a bunch of carbon-sucking aliens visit planet Earth and deal with the problem. Absolutely brilliant idea. Is it a reliable political or policy
Carbon-sucking
strategy?
aliens is the argument that was brought up. What can you answer to that?
I think it was
Can I finish
it
my
was
thought?
a euphemism.
I don't think it's so.
No.
I agree. We need it. Can we have it? No. I've spent a lot of years looking at all of the individual technologies that are being proposed, ranging from direct air capture, bioenergy with CCS, enhanced weathering, biochar, etc. None of them actually are currently, pointing in a direction where they would solve anything with regards to climate, but they would actually make so many things worse, because as you explained as well, it's not just about carbon, it's not just about climate. We're looking at crossing several planetary boundaries at the same time. So if we wanted, we definitely need more research and we need innovation, and technologies are part of that. But an offset business, and most of these carbon removal projects are offset projects financed through offsets.
Yes.
We have no space for offsets on this planet within the carbon budget, that is already negative. So there needs to be some framework around how we think about solutions.
Martin, you wanted to...
Okay. I think we all agree on the imperative of removing carbon. Right. We are mostly arguing, if I can say we, so that side of the room, for ecosystems-based carbon removal, or in a less fancy word, plants, vegetation, because photosynthesis is just a system that works since 3.5 billion years. It's a proven one. I would be jumping on every technology that really is able to remove gigatons of carbon. I've seen many different approaches of that. And, if there is one, please educate us, and, we will be fierce supporter of it. My fear is a little bit different, that people basically don't solve the problems with the tools we have today, because somehow we hope for a wonderful technological revolution to save us at a later day. And we cannot afford waiting any longer with getting the carbon out of the atmosphere.
Kaisu, I think we also get a sense of there being something very important for the small holdings, for the grassroots, and that's where you come in. The old phrase was, act local, think global.
Yeah, well, for me, it's we can't really use the very tools to solve the problems that have created the problems. I find that very problematic approach.
How so?
I think it is a crisis of human mind, as much as it is a crisis of climate, biodiversity, ecology. I think we would also need to stop, and we would have the capacity to stop. But we're very unwilling to do so. We're holding on to these ideas, and these are also economic, these are business-based solutions to very deep and complex problems. And I feel like this discussion here is on so many scales, like yesterday's discussion on ecocide, that what are we really talking about when we're talking about climate crisis?
We don't have much time, but I'm going to get some questions.
Could you distinguish between technological solutions of carbon capture that we could have confidence would not impair the regenerative processes of the natural world, and some of them that you object to because they are experimental? We have no planet B. We can't experiment with this. I think that would be both a good business approach as well as the right thing to do.
So the technologies that we know wouldn't harm, because it's all part of a process. When we verify and when we look at these technologies, we look at different criteria that go beyond the carbon integrity and the net negativity. So the concept that, for a ton removed, you have it emitted 2 tons. We also look at, how it impacts the communities and the environments in which it operates. And so that's a fundamental for us to look for these technologies to take place and to get the funding and the approval from the states in which they operate. Right now, the technologies that fit this definition are direct air capture. You have bioenergy carbon capture and storage. You have biochar within the biomass carbon removal group, bio-oil, and then what you have as well is enhanced weathering and mineralization, as well as marine CDR, which include ocean alkalinity enhancement and direct ocean capture. And effectively, these are all projects. There's variants of it, of course, which are a bit more extreme that we do not look at. I wouldn't be able to name you a technology that that is considered harmful because they never go beyond the pilot stage. They never get the approvals needed from the states to operate. So I don't have a technology to mention that I'm saying, oh, this doesn't work. And by the way, cloud seeding has nothing to do with carbon removal.
Lili, you wanted to interject.
It's sold as a carbon, making us.
I think it's about making the planet cooler. Not so much about removing carbon.
Exactly. And that would be very dangerous.
Well,
and again, having nothing to do with that.
Right.
Okay, Lili.
I just wanted to add that some of these conversations and technological ideas are not new, and they've been around for decades, right? And the Convention on Biological Diversity, the CBD of the UN, already in 2010, the year 2010, after 10 years of deliberations at the UN level with lots of technical reports, assessments, they put a de facto global moratorium on all of these geoengineering technologies, and that just got reaffirmed last year for the second time. And there is additional regulation on marine geoengineering in the London Protocol to the London Convention on ocean dumping, which effectively bans commercial ocean fertilization and is moving towards regulating and potentially banning additional marine geoengineering technologies. I just say we're not operating in a legal or regulatory vacuum at the international level, and some of the technologies that you've named are covered by these international agreements that have been agreed and signed by consensus. The US is not a party to the CBD, I have to say.
Hi, thank you. My question is to Paolo primarily, but I want to defend the rest of the panel a little bit as a young person myself who's, again, frustrated with the climate justice movement. I want to understand how you think asset management solves the justice problem, the climate change part, right? Yeah. Because I get it, we have to remove carbon, but it does not solve the problem of why we've reached a stage of this much carbon emissions at primarily, and not. I understand that you don't want to be a tech skeptic, but again, technology doesn't solve how we've reached this stage. It does not heal. It just removes the effects that we have right now. So I want to understand how you think asset management and carbon removal is just, especially for vulnerable populations around the world from the global south.
Thank you. That's a super relevant question, and I'll show you why I'm doing it. Effectively, I took a very pragmatic view. What we need is a fundamental shift to the way we run our economies, and the missing factor in the way we run and operate, and if you look at our value creation process, is that we never factor in what the true cost of emissions are, the environmental externalities. What these technologies do is that they factor them in. When you're telling one of these big groups that effectively when they're emitting a ton, it will cost them $500 to bring it back in, to counterbalance it in a manner that is backed by science, it allows them to reconsider in the first place the emission. So it forces them to look at ways to deliver the same value without emitting as much carbon. So really forcing ourselves to go into the 90% reduction route. So of course, I'd like to, I'm not a techno-solutionist per se. Of course, I would like our ways to completely change our ways of operating. Wake up, it's not happening. No one is changing. The paradigm hasn't changed, so we need pragmatic ways to go about it. Or what we're going to face is doom in a couple of decades for all of us. And so for me, that's how we go about this, is we need to change it in a manner where we bring these big groups into the table and help them rationalize the cost of these externalities.
Martin, very quickly.
Very, very quickly. Paolo, I'm totally with you, and I think you nailed it. We need a global price on carbon, and we've been fighting for that for 30 years, and it's a scandal how we still don't have it, because everything would start with finally bringing all the externalities, and I'm totally with you on this one.
Gentleman here. Sorry.
Okay, yeah. Jude Ilo. I'm the CEO of the Hague Institute for Innovation of Law. So when we have conversations about critical issues like climate justice, the principal groups that bear the vulnerability of climate injustice are not in the room. They are not here. Because in communities, vulnerable communities, poor countries, coastal countries, they are already seeing the Armageddon that we're talking about here. And I think we have to come to this conversation with some level of modesty. And the first level of modesty is that there are no one solution to this problem. The second level of modesty is that there has to be contrary opinions on the room. I would take very strong exceptions for us to sit in a forum and call each other names. It is unacceptable. And I have to say that. It doesn't matter how angry you are. You can't call your panelists jokes. That is unacceptable. And this is the problem. Because we need collaborative efforts to address climate justice, when we come to the room with some level of moral dogmatism, we are not able to build that coalition. And when we're not able to build that coalition, the woman in my community whose house has been flooded for acts of environmental terrorism that was not her fault is suffering. And it is not enough for me to come to a conference, attack each other, and not find solutions to her problem.
I think you make a very, very good point. I think, question, and to whom?
Yeah, so I don't know, perhaps I missed it before, but I didn't hear any of the panelists talking about the contradiction between ever-growing economy and a finite planet. Just if you can address it in any way.
Who would like to take down, Lili?
So the way that I've seen it play out in international climate conversations most recently is actually in the IPCC, where some recent studies show that the IPCC, we rely on their scenarios and integrated assessment models and pathways to be policy relevant, right? But turns out that all of the models underpinning that assume, they're mostly black boxes, but they assume that the global north is going to remain rich and become richer, and the global south is going to remain poor, and that we'll see endless growth on a finite planet. That is built into the models that then spit out and produce the scenarios that are meant to guide our policymaking, which is highly inequitable. So interestingly, at the last two IPCC meetings, that became very apparent and turned into a very political conversation. So that's one of the few places where the models, the flaws in the models sparked that debate. Otherwise, I see that debate, which is so important, play out mostly in informal circles and civil society conversations and some academic circles. But because it's so linked to the modeling and the policy relevance of IPCC models, it's entered that space as well.
Heidi, very quickly.
Okay. Today we have 8 billion people on the planet. In 25 years, there will be 10 billion people. I'm working very, very closely with UNEP and the World Agroforestry Center to plant an estimated 15 billion trees in Kenya, because that, again, is going to sequester the carbon. It's called African orphan crops. and they're highly nutritious. Again, it's about the soil and the soul, right? The soul of humanity, to make a conscious decision so that we are planting peace through agriculture. And that is the natural world in how we're going to be able to dig ourselves out of this mess and feed the future and move on from a culture of war and hatred and bad words that are said. We have to have collaboration, cooperation, and best practices.
And that's what we're trying to drive towards. And
I would like to say something because sometimes the problems are coming because they are not focused properly, in my opinion. And I'm going to be brief. The problem is, like, for example, for years I heard that slogan of save the planet. And that's wrong. In my opinion, the planet doesn't need to be saved. Because no matter what we do, we will go away, but the planet will come back. We'll take what belongs to it. It happened before. You know, the planet will be there. It will go down, and then we'll raise again with new forms of life.
So what we're doing is saving ourselves, is that what
exactly. The problem is we don't understand, and that's why we don't have enough fear. You know, this is like religions. Religions are based on fear, so you mental control the people. The people are aware of the fears. So that's the point. The people are not scared of the reality of the situation. Who is in danger today, in my opinion, it's not the planet. It's our ecosystem, and that means ourselves. And in several levels, because we are changing our ecosystem, and we need to live in one ecosystem. And out there's so many threats that we don't realize. Could be bacteria or other things. There are bacteria that they don't affect us because they need a temperature of the body to live. And they are adapted. But I'm going to have one sentence and finish. But there is an evolution. If the planet gets warmer, the ecosystem is different, they will adapt to be a threat on us. And just to finalize this, what you say right now, that's the main problem of this planet. It's overpopulated for more than the double, in my opinion.
Toni, you've got to...
All analyses show that it's not a problem of number of people, it's a problem of consumption. It's a problem of consumption of 10% wealthy. So I strongly disagree that it is a number of people on the planet which is kind of key problem. It is consumption. We are trying as an organization to keep up public debate in Brussels, and now we are calling it economy of one planet. But apparently in the mainstream media and in the mainstream politics, it became woke to claim that our economy should fit the planet and not otherwise around. So basic sense and basic science over the last 10 years is being basically ridiculized and make kind of radical and extreme type of opinion, which is shocking and very depressing.
Right, we've only got a few minutes. Please, Martin.
Answer the gentleman's question, actually?
Sure.
We did? No, but because I don't feel like we did. Did we answer your question or not?
Well, partly there was some interesting ones.
My simple answer to you is, for us, if we want to, what you were saying is that there is a paradox between the way we run our economies, which are limitless, it's about growing GDP, and the finite resources we have on Earth. I think it's to your point, the solution to that is by internalizing these externalities, having a good understanding of, the finiteness, if we can say that. I'm not an English speaker. Of the resources that are available and factoring them in our value creation process. And again, I think, putting a steep cost to, these environmental externalities is definitely a way to do that.
Quickly, Martin. Again.
Yeah, and also to your question. Absolutely, what makes human life possible is functioning natural cycles, be it the carbon cycle, be it biodiversity. What this business model or this economic model that we have is disrupting these cycles. You're burning fossil fuel, which is the result of hundreds of thousands of years of biological production, if you want to label this way. If you are disrupting, soil health, for example, it has repercussion on human health, because we are mirroring with our guts what's happening in the soil. So over and above the carbon cycle, we need to look into natural cycles, because we cannot afford to break the natural cycle, which is the very basis of our life. So that's my answer to you.
Thank you very much indeed. We're out of time. Please give it up for our panelists. And